Leisure Suit Larry, one of the oldest and most well-known adventure game series for adults, created by Lowe, whose first game came out as far back as 1987, published by Sierra all the way to 2009, and was then taken by Codemasters, whose last game of the series was Leisure Suit Larry Reloaded, the second remake of the first game from 1987, which was crowdfunded on Kickstarter and released in 2013. After that, the franchise went into, I guess you could say, hibernation for about half a decade. It seemed like there was not going to be a new Leisure Suit Larry game. Then, in 2018, a new Leisure Suit Larry game titled as Wet Dreams Don't Dry was announced. The game was developed by a small German developer, Crazy Bunch, which I think is a fitting name for them because I think you have to be at least a little bit crazy to make a game like Leisure Suit Larry in this day and age of political correctness. The game was released and published by Assemble Entertainment in November 2018. Now, I may not be the best person to ask whether Wet Dreams Don't Dry is a good Leisure Suit Larry game, since Reloaded is the only other game of the series that I have played, but I'll try my best. If nothing else, I can still give my opinions of it as an adventure game in general. So the question is, did Crazy Bunch succeed in making a good Leisure Suit Larry adventure game without Lowe involved in the development? Did they understand what Leisure Suit Larry is about? My name is Siperos, and these are my thoughts on Leisure Suit Larry, Wet Dreams Don't Dry. The story starts with good old Larry Laffer waking up from some sort of hibernation in a dark room. What a perfect analogy for the series, while not knowing where he is or what's going on. Once he leaves the room that's under the streets right next to the Lefty's bar and walks in, he learns that it's year 2018, and he has been sleeping for about 30 years and, well, a lot has changed since the 80s. But Larry being Larry, he doesn't stop to think about that and resolves himself to chasing women again. Soon after that, Larry discovers a secret payphone prototype in Lefty's bathroom. The AI of the payphone tells him to return it to Bill B.J. Jobs at Prune headquarters. There he meets B.J.'s beautiful assistant, Fate, whom Larry of course tries to ask for a date, but she states that she only dates men with a perfect score on the dating app called Timber. As Larry gets a new payphone of his own as a reward for returning the prototype, Larry starts to meet various people via the dating app and date many women in order to get that perfect Timber score for Fate. Very simple and straightforward plot, like expected from a Leisure Suit Larry game, and just like with Reloaded. But I think that the story overall is more interesting and told better in Wet Dreams Don't Dry. It feels more engaging and there's some interesting turn of events and twists in the plot. Reloaded was a very passive game in a way, as far as the story goes. So much so that you eventually might get tired of the game, its raunchy humor and daddy jokes. I started to feel like that around the end game and was glad that Reloaded wasn't much longer than that. But I didn't get that sense of fatigue in Wet Dreams Don't Dry. And I think that the biggest reason for that is the story and how it's told. Larry being sent straight to 2018 from the 80s was a good and amusing idea. And the characters, especially the women you're supposed to try and score with, are more active and not just passively waiting for you to get the stuff they want, although they do that too, but more about them in a moment. Speaking about the characters, let's talk about our womanizing protagonist himself, Larry Laffer. As you can see, he looks different in Wet Dreams Don't Dry. He's not a midget anymore. He looks more like a college student cosplaying as Larry, and funnily enough, that's what one of the women in the game also thought. And I'm not gonna lie, when I first saw him in the in-game screenshots, I didn't like his new look. I think the cartoony midget look worked perfectly for him because it emphasized what kind of a pathetic little man he is. However, his new look grew on me quickly, so I don't mind it personally. What really saved the character and convinced me that this is the Larry Laffer was the voice actor, Jan Robson, who has voiced Larry in every Leisure Suit Larry game that had voice acting. Excluded the two black sheep of the franchise, Magna Cum Laude and Box Office Bust, with Larry's nephew as the main character.
If there's one thing I know, it's how to cool a hot woman down. That sounded better in my head.
If the voice actor had been different, I don't think it would have worked. So Larry was done well in my opinion. He might be a pathetic loser, but he's also optimistic, naive, and even clueless since, after all, he basically time-traveled 30 years to the future from the 80s. And it's fun to see his reactions to the modern era with the internet, smartphones, dating apps, and so on. I also like how Larry talks a lot more in Wet Dreams Don't Dry due to the lack of a narrator. While I missed a narrator from Reloaded, I think that letting Larry do the talking and let his personality come out more was a good decision. As for other characters, well, we only care about the women in a Lizard Larry game, don't we? There's 5 of them in total. Compared to the women of Reloaded, the girls of Wet Dreams Don't Dry are a mixed bag for me. I think the women are more than just eye candy in this game with personalities, dreams and goals which makes them more than just something pretty to look at. Lemma, for example, needs to start her rock and roll concert, Anu tries to infiltrate into Prune headquarters to learn their dirty secrets, and Eri wants to become a stripper because of course she does. They are more active in this game, moving from one place to another, making them more engaging as characters, whom I could actually give a damn about, and also makes the story overall more interesting. The downside of the women in Wet Dreams Don't Dry, in my opinion, is the fact that they are essentially cartoon characters instead of more realistic looking hot women like the ones in Reloaded and other Lisa Suit Larry games. I mean, look at her, hot damn! Sure, they look fine, even attractive when wearing very little clothing, but not as sexy or desirable. But there is a reason for these artistic changes for both the women and Larry himself. In one of their Making of Lisa Suit Larry Wet Dreams Don't Dry documentary videos, Crazy Bunch explained that they thought that in the past games Larry looked weird and out of place as a cartoony midget next to more realistically featured women, and yeah, I can see where they are coming from. So they wanted to change that by redesigning Larry and the women, the rest of the characters following suit, to look like they all belong to the same world. And I can respect that decision, even if I think that some sexiness was lost in the process. And hey, it could have been much worse. Much worse. And lastly, regarding the characters, even though I said that outside of Larry only women matter in a Lisa Suit Larry game, I think I should give an honorable mention to the 2 gay characters, Dick Ryder and Lance Straightman. Yeah, those are their names. A troubled couple whom you help to get back together after their nasty breakup. At first I was a little skeptical how they are going to fit them into a Lisa Suit Larry game since, after all, we are here to hit on women and not guys. But I think Crazy Punch did a great job by adding this cute love story you play a rolling as the middleman. And it was rather amusing to watch Larry being completely oblivious to one of the guy's approaches. Which makes sense because people were not exactly as open about their gayness in Larry's time in the 80s as they are today. Overall, cute little side plot they integrated well into the main story, makes sense for the time period, and really emphasized how times have changed over the past 30 years. And a few words about the overall art style of the game. That's another thing that I criticized immediately when I saw the first screenshots. The color scheme. It's so pink and purple. Too many soft and, for the lack of a better word, girly colors. This is the kind of color palette I would expect from a Barbie game. That was my first impression, but the art style also grew on me quickly, so it didn't bother me that much at the end of the day. And the 2D graphics and animation overall is nice and smooth. But if I had to choose, I would pick Reloaded over Wet Dreams Don't Dry when it comes to the art style and color scheme. Then the sense of humor. Did they get that right? It's a raunchy and obviously a lewd game, although maybe slightly more tamed compared to Reloaded, filled with sexual innuendos and bad daddy jokes that some people will find funny and some understandably won't. The Prune headquarters is shaped like a large penis accompanied by a pair of balls, and their logo is shaped like, well, a vagina. So yeah, obviously the game isn't taking itself seriously, is self-aware, and just like Reloaded, doesn't try to be more than what it is. You'll be picking up stuff such as dildos, condoms, a fleshlight, and some other questionable items along with many more ordinary ones. Speaking about items, let's go to the puzzles next. The puzzles of Wet Dreams Don't Dry are, for the most part, straightforward, lewd, of course, and not that hard to figure out. Although there are a handful of head-scratching ones as well that require you to think more creatively. Larry or someone else usually gives you important clues too occasionally, so listen to what they say closely when, for example, inspecting objects. There were times when I was doing great progress in short amount of time and then hit a wall and didn't know for a long time what I had to do next. Maybe that's why it took me about 20-21 hours or so to beat the game. But I didn't get stuck, at least for not too long, because of the puzzles. I got stuck because of how some of the items were placed in the game. They were, well, I can't really say well hidden because they are usually right there in front of your face, but they looked like they were part of the background and I couldn't really see them. They didn't stick out enough. Like these flowers here, for example. I never registered them until I happened to hover my mouse over them and I saw the text on the bottom of the screen change and realized that I could pick them up. But the worst offender in my opinion was the piece of gum. Not only I couldn't see one stuck on the bar until I went to take a peek at a walkthrough because I was stuck, but there already was a full pack of gum in Erin's room upstairs, and the game didn't give me the option to even try to pick it up or just take one gum from the pack. If it wasn't for those few parts, I think I could have beaten the game much faster, like maybe around 15 hours. So there is no pixel hunting in the game, so keep your eyes open and hover your mouse over every nook and cranny. And no, the game doesn't have a feature that highlights pickable items or interactable objects for you. It's old school like that, for better or worse. In this case, worse I would say. You can also die in Wet Dreams Don't Dry, but you get to continue from the moment before your fatal action, so you're not being punished in any way by getting Larry killed. So, is Leisure Suit Larry, Wet Dreams Don't Dry, a good Leisure Suit Larry game? I think so, yes. Sure, Larry looks different from what we are used to, but the right personality is there, and having Robson as the voice actor saved the character. The raunchy humor, lewd scenes, and puzzles are still there. The game knows what it is and doesn't try to pretend to be anything else. I think the story was done better here than in Reloaded, more gripping and kept me interested to see how the game will end, even if the plot itself is very simple and nothing special at the end of the day, as you might expect from a Leisure Suit Larry game. Not a huge fan of the overall art style, and I think some sexiness was lost as the women were, I guess you could say, downgraded into more cartoony look. But as characters they are more interesting than the ones from Reloaded, so that's another plus. As an adventure game in general, it's alright. The puzzles are not very hard at the end of the day, and I think that the biggest challenge will be finding certain items for the reasons I mentioned. The pixel hunting and lack of highlight feature of any kind makes the game somewhat beginner unfriendly, so I would not necessarily recommend Wet Dreams Don't Dry to beginners or more casual adventurers. But I would certainly recommend it to more seasoned veterans and, of course, Leisure Suit Larry fans. It's an old school adventure game through and through and doesn't try to reinvent the genre, for better or worse. After watching their short making of Leisure Suit Larry Wet Dreams Don't Dry documentary, I dare to say that Crazy Punch understood what the series is about and managed to keep the lewd spirit of Leisure Suit Larry, while also giving their own spin to the franchise. I certainly would not mind seeing a new adventure game, whether it's Leisure Suit Larry or something else, from this small German developer in the future. Oh, and in case you want to check out that making of Leisure Suit Larry Wet Dreams Don't Dry documentary yourself, which is in 3 about 5-minute long parts, the link to the first part can be found down below in the description. And there you go folks, those were my thoughts on Leisure Suit Larry Wet Dreams Don't Dry. What are your thoughts on the game? Let me know in the comments and thanks for watching.